It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. Listen, I am so glad y'all here. I had absolutely no idea what I was going to talk about today, and I didn't get an opportunity to call my chief advisor, uh, the octogenarian Jim Nunley, and so I think I am just going to talk about the things that have been on my heart this week for this particular Filter Free Friday. Andrew Lester died this week. Um, he is the 80 or was the 86-year-old man who shot Ralph Yarl. And if you're not from the Kansas City area, you might not know the story, but young black boy goes to pick up his siblings, but he goes to the wrong street. And when he knocks on the door, he ends up getting shot twice by the then 84-year-old Andrew Lester. And the local media, by and large, was not really covering the case um, until the KC Defender, which is a black paper here, covered it and got more information about it. And it was interesting because the day after um, this teenager had been shot in the head, um, the neighbors had cleaned up the glass. He shot through the through this glass storm door and had replaced it. Um, and I brought up credentialing today in the caption because I don't know that I have been embarrassed by the life that I was so fortunate to have lived, but I've just never thought about certain things as benefits to my experience. And here's what I mean. Somebody gets shot in the city. The last thing you do is go over there and start sweeping up glass. Because, first of all, you don't want to be implicated in this crime if it was one. And second of all, ain't nobody going to let you go over there and sweep up the glass. There's going to be police tape. It's going to be treated as a crime scene. No one's going to treat a shooting whereby a teenager has gotten shot in the head twice as, oh, it's just an accident and neighbors go right ahead and clean up and replace the door, right? It's like a crime scene. One of the things I like to do for a hobby, it was assigned to me by my therapist in 2022, is to read fiction. I never used to read fiction before. I felt like it was a kind of a waste of my time. But I like to read the Lincoln Rhymes series. It's if you've read The Bone Collector or seen the movie, Lincoln Rhyme is uh, quadriplegic, but he is a detective, specifically focused on identifying serial killers in massive cases. He was played by Denzel Washington. And in this particular series, Lincoln Rhyme always says that desperation causes you to be blind, and so you got to always kind of keep your cool about yourself. But he also regularly says, don't let nobody go in and touch the crime scene. So interestingly enough, I'm actually embarrassed by what I'm about to tell you. When I heard that Andrew Lester had, one, pled guilty, and then two, just died from natural causes, I was kind of numb. I didn't really feel grief. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel anything. Um, I was just thinking about this young boy who was going to go pick up his siblings, who was an exceptional musician whose life has drastically changed because of how someone was conditioned to think about him and his skin. But the absurdity of neighbors cleaning up the scene. And by the way, when we went on that block to protest to make sure that Mr. Lester got arrested in this situation, because he had not been arrested, he was just at home after shooting a teenage boy in the head twice through a storm door, just for knocking. There were neighbors sitting on their lawn, like arms folded, mad at us as the protesters, and using tactical empathy. I understand. Why these people? You moved to Clay County because you want quiet. You moved to Clay County because you don't want people from the city showing up. You moved to Clay County because you want peace and quiet. But there's a therapist that I follow on social media who says that if you have to protect your peace, you don't have it. I'll say it once more. If you have to protect your peace, you don't have it. And anyway, I send all my best to Ralph Yarl and his family, and I hope that he is doing well and healing. And I'm grateful he wasn't going to have to go through a trial anyway because Mr. Lester had accepted a plea deal. But a couple of weeks ago, I was a keynote speaker at the Beloved Conference at the Resurrection, and the theme was about telling your story, right? The theme was about telling your story. And I'm pausing because I think I still question sometimes if I have a right to tell my own story. But I told the story of my DNA surprise that happened in 2022. And I told it as a joke because one of my 3 values is humor. And I find that it's really helpful for me to be able to laugh through things that would cause other people to cry. But that wasn't the point of the story. In fact, I value telling my own story, not other people's story. And what I was hoping to do was to highlight that because of what had happened to me, you need to know the story, right? You need to know that everyone around me knew that I had a different father. No one thought it well to tell me until I uncovered it on my own, pretty much, and found Mr. Richardson, who is my biological father and still living today, and who is also, like Jim, an octogenarian, 80 years old. No one told me this information until I had found it out on my own. And when they did, many people felt like I shouldn't be talking about it. Many people felt like that I was embarrassing my mother. But what's interesting is one of my favorite books that I've written to date is still The Wholly Educated MFer. And I share in here that I value telling my own story. I get nothing out of telling someone else's story. But sometimes to understand how a person shows up as who they are, you have to know the story. And what I was hoping to do was to share that the important part of my story is the anger that I felt, the betrayal that I felt, the genetic bewilderment that I felt. I am a very smart person. You can take a lot of things from me, but you can't take that away. But I couldn't understand the basics of genealogy and genetics. And here's what I mean. My DNA angel had found my paternal grandparents. So, Nicole, these are your dad, this is their grandparents, your paternal grandparents. I did not immediately connect because I was confused that they had 4 children, 4 boys, 9 children, 4 boys, and that one of those sons had to be my father. I couldn't make sense of it, and I'm a smart person. That was the part of that is still the part of the story that is most important, because when you trust somebody, and I'm telling you, I don't trust nobody more than I trust Sister Gertrude Price. When you trust somebody, whatever your reason, and then that person you find has betrayed you. I know people who have been in relationship. I myself have been in relationship. It is difficult. And listen, let me tell you what God knows. I can't stand crying in public, child. It just feels like it's such a distraction. And one day I'll get over it. But to be able to trust someone actually is what causes you to not be able to see the things that are right in front of you. And I'm never telling that story about my mother. I'm telling that story about me because I used to think, listen, you make decisions based on logic and reason. That's how you make decisions. That's how people make decisions. I remember the very first time I took the Myers-Briggs type indicator, and when you got to the T and F, which is how you make decisions, T means thinking, F means feeling. The facilitator said something like, if you make decisions with logic and reason, you happen to be a T. I remember raising my hand saying, if you don't make decisions with logic and reason, how do you make decisions? The whole class busted out laughing. And then I was working at Hallmark Cards at the time, which probably had far more feelers in at any corporation than that probably ever exist. And people were like, well, some people make decisions based on empathy and compassion. They step into a situation and want to know what would they want to happen if it were them. And I remember sitting back in my chair going, well, you can't make solid decisions that way. And it was one of the first times that I had been drastically shifted in how I thought about people and feelings. Because, quite frankly, the folks who were making decisions with empathy and compassion were the ones who were progressing in their leadership journey. Those of us who were wholly logical and reasonable and questioning and critical, we were working for those other people. And today I'm like, you know what they had that 80% of us in the US don't have? And that's not hyperbole, that's data. They have the ability to step in the skin of another person and go, what would I want to happen if this were my lived experience and this were me? And so, because of that, they have the ability to mobilize, to organize, to pull people together in ways that sometimes don't even make any sense. And so, when I think back to the parts of my story that really matter and how this is coming together, I can't help but think about Brad, the pimp who was across the street. Because while well-meaning people every day were judging Brad for his line of work, judging Brad for his oppressive nature, Brad was winning because Brad understood exactly how people moved and why. He used empathy as a tool of destruction. And while I don't believe that that's a good use of empathy, trying to teach it to people who are logical and reasonable is very difficult because I was too smart for my own good. I was so hell bent on being right. So hell bent on being right that I was not effective. And when I tell the story about my DNA discovery, it was true there too. You see, I do not, people will say I look like my mother. I do not look like my mother. I'm shaped like her. I have her mannerisms. I don't have her face. This face is the combination of Mr. Richardson's and a maternal great aunt. That's what this face is. And so that means that the data was right in front of me my whole life. The entire way I behave matches no one. And therefore, that means the data was in front of me my whole life. When I consider that in 2012, when I got into Ancestry.com, I didn't recognize hardly any of the genetic matches that weren't on my mother's side. The data was there my whole life. But I don't want you to miss this. Not the story. The story is that everyday people lie to themselves and they lie to God too. That ain't me. That's Lauryn Hill. If you've ever listened to the album, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. And so when you are lying to yourself, logic, reason, critical questioning The sooner we learn this about people, the sooner we will be able to mobilize people for good. Final point. I grew up in the heart of Kansas City during the height of the crack cocaine epidemic. I never even think much about that story. I remember the day that I told the story, I was asked to deliver a keynote at the United Way campaign. I was at Hallmark at work in front of like 500 people. And God had given me that story to tell. And quite frankly, before I told it, I didn't think much about it. Didn't think much about it at all. Because it's just, just kind of who you are. But what growing up in the heart of the city during the crack cocaine epidemic teaches you is that when people outside just indiscriminately firing shots, you don't stick your head out there. Even if you got weaponry too, you get down. You try to figure out where the shots are coming from. Sometimes you wait till the shots stop. You know good and well somebody might get hit during that time while you sitting down listening and waiting. But if you put your head out there in that moment, you're not going to be helpful. And that does not mean that you ain't going to do nothing about it. That just means that whoever outside shooting at the moment, they going to run out of bullets. They going to leave. Eventually the police going to show up, something. But if you are going to be helpful, you don't stick your head out there right away. That's reactionary. Good strategist. Wait, lay down, organize, use the planning and training that has been put in front of them to help them be able to respond. Respond, not react. And respond might look like lots of different things. But this week, so many people, actually in the last 60 days or so many people have been coming to me and saying, Nicole, what's your goal? Nicole, what do we do? And I'm telling you, I have never written because I've had a goal other than I just want to write. I just like to write. I have never done community work because I've had a goal. And I know that's really hard for people to get their heads around. Because that's just not the way of people, right? People don't just do stuff just because. I know there's a persistent belief that I'm incredibly controlling. I tend to think of myself as particular, right? Like I'm particular about how my clothes feel, particular about how my hair looks. I'm particular about, how my books are organized. But I will absolutely support a community event just because it makes me feel good. There's nothing behind that. And so it took me until this morning to realize that, that perhaps people are asking me what we should do because people think I have a goal or that I know. I don't. But what I'll tell you is this. I know from the way I grew up that when the shots are being fired, you don't just stick your head out. That you sit back and try to figure out what's happening to figure out what your next move or response is going to be. The 922-page document called the Project 2025 is very public. It is clear and plain. It took 40 years to put together. It's a lot of shots fired. But reading it will help you to not have a feeling of despair and desperation. Reading it will help you focus. Reading it will give you a sense for what other people's goals are. Reading it gives you the information you need to understand what other people think, feel, and believe. Might not be logical and reasonable to you. You don't have to agree to be empathetic. In fact, agreement's not a requirement at all of empathy. What is a requirement is that you recognize that when you feel big emotions like anger, fury, despair, sometimes even high levels of excitement, the blood in the brain ain't going to the right spot. That you have to process those feelings in order to be able to figure out what your next move is going to be. And if ever I felt desperation, one of the first times is living in a house where there are bullet holes in the facade, where sometimes you got to sleep on the floor. But the second time was when my entire identity was shattered. And many of you are having your entire identity shattered right now. What you thought you believed about this place is not what it is. What you thought you believed about what's legal and morally right and ethical and who would stand up, blah, blah, blah. It's being shattered. It makes total sense to be bewildered and not be able to look at, because we trust so much, right? Because we trust so much. But I'm telling you, if you are 16-year-old Ralph Yarl and all you doing is haphazardly going to pick up your sibling from a friend's house and you end up running down the street with 2 shots in your body and nobody will help you, it is an indication that every single day, anything can happen. And we have to be prepared for the worst. I am a present day realist, eternal optimist. I am not a person who retreats from things. And I need more people more often trying to tap into all of the experiences that they have had, because every single one of them is going to give you what you need to be able to help us right now, babe. And if there's anybody who understands what it looks like to fight from behind, it's us. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. We got plenty work to do.